Deleted Session, April 16, 1981. Now, for all of its seeming sophistication, the self as generally seen by science is only science's interpretation of the sinful self in mechanistic terms. Both religion and science see the self as primarily heir to flaws, decay. Only science's sinful self operates in a framework in which there is no sacramental redemption. Science sees the world as rushing toward its own dissolution, and the self as the mechanistic system running down from the moment of its conception. It seems under those conditions that only pessimism can be an adequate response, so that any private or global condition of an adverse nature, left alone, will further deteriorate. Remember, along with these passages, material I gave recently on the uses of the rational mind and its necessary dependence upon intelligence that it cannot itself directly perceive. The world in those terms is as much the result of unpredictable behavior, unforeseen events, unexpected benefits, unforeseeable conditions, as it is the result of predictable actions, usually cause and effect phenomena, and a close inspection of public and private life will show quite clearly that both are magnificently touched by significant coincidences. Unexpected events, unpredictable actions of the most auspicious nature. When it seems that left alone, Ruber's condition will only worsen. You are following those old patterns of conditioned thought, projecting negative situations into the future, imagining the unfortunate outcome or outcomes, and acting as if you operated within a closed system. You are concentrating upon the problem in order to solve it, often scaring yourselves into further depressions. That is the way you have been taught to solve problems. The sinful self-concept causes you to expect the worst in any given situation. In that light, hopeful expectation seems quite out of place and unworkable. Without the dictates of the sinful self, however, you can begin to sense the contours of the natural self, or the natural person. You can begin to sense your own good natures. In other words, and those basic natures are automatically optimistic. They automatically expect the best from any situation. They represent your natural persons. As Ruber begins to understand the artificial characteristics of the sinful self-concept, then those natural characteristics of the natural person will more and more emerge. It will be, for example, less difficult to have pleasant expectations, for they will begin to bubble up by themselves into the mind. It is true that the sinful self carries with it a group of patterns or reactions, methods of dealing with problems, and so Ruber's beliefs along those lines have colored his reactions, his plans, his dealings with you through the years. In the past, however, those methods seemed to make sense. If you believe that the self is sinful or deceptive, then you must indeed set up barriers, so that you allow expression while monitoring it very carefully at the same time. The barriers become unnecessary when you realize that the self is not sinful. I use the word sinful in Ruber's case because of the early church connections in particular. Science's flawed self still carries the same import. However, the idea being that while science does not deal with values, so it says it misleads itself considerably in making such statements, for it projects the worst kind of values both upon mankind and the rest of nature. So even if you are not tainted from religion's old beliefs, it is difficult to escape such ideas. Many of Ruber's beliefs have changed, but the core belief in the sinful self has been very stubborn. While you do not possess it in the same fashion, you are also tainted by it, picking up such beliefs from early background, and primarily from your father in that regard. The natural person can be evoked, and its responses elicited, partly through touching and through statements of love and affection. The sinful self feels it does not deserve such attention. Love is therefore surrounded very carefully by all kinds of barriers by both science and religion, and in your own lives you could now be much more demonstrative in those regards, for they offer a natural therapy. I do not want to give you too much child material in a concentrated period of time. Therefore, remember during the days, for example, to allow yourselves some enjoyments, and to consider any feelings, even unpleasant ones, as valuable expressions of sensation or emotion. Ruber was not responsible for the housekeeper's death when he was in high school. He felt such accusations, however, even those made him question the nature of reality. They were graced for the meal. They were the way the problem was stated. An important point here, you use consciousness, when you think of as rational consciousness, in an unusual manner. Obviously, other species use their consciousnesses differently, in a fashion their knowledge is immediately acted upon. This carries with it an exquisite sense of biological and spiritual security. Your kind of consciousness, relatively speaking, involves some intrinsic difficulties, along with spectacular potentials. You are learning how to form reality from your own beliefs, while having at the same time the freedom to choose those beliefs, to choose your mental state in a way that the animals, for example, do not. In that larger picture, there are no errors, for each action, pleasant or not, will in its fashion be redeemed, both in relationship to itself and in relationship to a larger picture that the conscious mind may not be able presently to perceive. This means that you deal even consciously with bad areas of probabilities, with various combinations, with ways in which identity itself will be defined and explained. You will react to your definitions of yourselves. In that regard, the sinful self-concept represents an exaggerated, distorted version of man's recognition that in certain ways he seems less sure of himself than the other species. That's a is, for he has taken upon himself the creative recognition of uncertainties. He is learning to create whole private and public worlds that directly correspond to his own states of mind. The possible diversity and the vast assortment of the creative ventures possible mean that he had accepted certain measures of uncertainty. He has snubs. Even these, however, act as automatic learning devices, and left alone, they themselves trigger the necessary creative procedures that would begin corrective measures. When the belief in the sinful self is held, however, the very corrective measures themselves are often not trusted. In Ruber's case, the core belief again in the sinful self was hard to differentiate, because it could appear in many other guises. It dropped its most obvious religious coloration for some time, and could simply appear as an unusually strong dedication to work and discipline. The sinful self has no use for play, because it believes so fervently that left alone it will indeed be lazy or childish, or fritter itself away, or looking at it the other way. It fears that left alone, it will only play. All will be thoughtful. You see this most clearly in Protestant theology. These issues can all be encountered, however, and adequately encountered once they are clearly understood. It is not particularly necessary that Rupert dig back into the past on purpose to discover those old feelings. Many will now surface most likely on their own in response to current events. As per this warning, the memories will not be frozen, but will move naturally into present experience and take their natural place. He should definitely express any feelings that come to mind in that fashion, and as he did with the flashing moment of anger at you. Those feelings represent communication. They will work themselves out as long as they are expressed. That will be all for this evening. Ralph said, okay. They said, no question from the gallery? Ralph said, nope. They said, then I bid you a fond good evening. Ralph said, thank you, Seth.